But first, I don't want to be critical of the PM for finally turning up in Alice Springs. I think leaders have got to get out of their office, more often, not less. But let's be honest, in response to a crisis of violence that's only getting worse, not better, the changes he announced last night are band-aids on a bullet wound. Indeed, he spent more time on his private jet to get there and back than he did on the ground talking to locals. And that's not just my observation, that's the sort of stuff that Alice Springs residents have had to say today. Disappointed that all the Prime Minister has announced is a few lower order grog restrictions. Yet another report to be done and more money, as often is the case with Aboriginal affairs, more money thrown at problems but not linked to actual outcomes on the ground. Now, the facts are not in dispute. Violent crime in Alice Springs is up around 50% since the alcohol bans were lifted, and gangs of youths are rampaging every night, terrorising locals, and what tourists are left in what was once a bucket list, must-visit sort of place for so many of us. I first went to Alice as a young uni student almost 30 years ago, and I've been regularly back ever since. And what I've seen is a regional town go backwards and look more and more like a war-torn place from overseas rather than somewhere in a country we know and love. But it's not just Alice, as local Territorians will tell you. Since Labor scrapped the alcohol controls, the violence and dysfunction is infecting other communities, although by far the worst is what we're seeing play out in Central Australia. So what's the detail that the Prime Minister announced and what's been the reaction? Well, as I touched on last night, all that's been agreed is to impose a temporary ban for 3 months on takeaway alcohol sales on Mondays and Tuesdays, with reduced hours on other days, and to spend more money on the sort of social work programs that have consistently failed for decades. That's it. No register of banned drinkers to control violent offenders, no extra police to ensure that gangs don't rule the streets, and nothing substantial to deal with the issues around kids, because while alcohol plays a part for some, it's not the whole story. Like the Chief Minister in the NT, the PM's terrified of being labelled racist, and he's clearly putting the politically correct sensibilities of inner city Greens ahead of the safety needs of Aboriginal people in remote Australia. Problem drinkers in places like Alice, black or white, should not be able to buy booze anytime, not just on Monday and Tuesdays, but every day of the week. And the police presence on the ground must be boosted in places like the Alice Springs so that people can get on with their lives without fear of home invasions, ram raids or random assaults in the street. The PM announced more money for police yesterday, but not an extra officer, not one extra officer. Now, what's the point of more money if it doesn't mean more uniforms on the ground? But there's a deeper problem here that's at the heart of everything wrong in remote Australia. And that's this notion that Indigenous people are somehow different and separate, and that rules that apply everywhere else are somehow wrong and even racist if we apply them to Indigenous people. Now, how does this even make sense? We can't ban grog in Aboriginal communities lest anyone think we're making laws that impact one race but not another. Yet at the same time, this government wants us to change the Constitution to allow one race to impact our laws more than others. Again, it's not as if these grog bans were based on race anyway. They apply to everyone who lived and worked in these remote communities. Someone like my sister and other nurses like her, or other workers who are not Indigenous but live and work in remote parts of our country. So ask yourself this: is the proposed voice going to make separatism better or worse? One way or another, it's inevitable that the Alice Springs crisis is going to get wrapped up in the voice debate. Some will say Alice shows that only a voice can tackle these sort of intractable problems. Others, more plausibly, will say that yet another talkfest has no chance of solving issues that have been talked and talked about for years but not fixed. If voice supporters have any new ideas that will fix things at Alice, well, don't wait till the referendum. They should tell us all now. If you think being black gives you the answers here, don't wait for your seat on the voice. Come forward, because vulnerable women and children in Alice can't wait. But if there are no new answers, why will the voice make any difference? Now, the voice isn't the answer here. The problem has gone on for too long. Too many people have acted as if there's one rule for Aboriginal people and another rule for everyone else, and we're all too scared to speak up and call out in Aboriginal communities what we just wouldn't tolerate in suburbs and towns where most of us live. And Labor's voice, I fear, if it gets up, will just make all of this worse. When even the local Labor MP, Marion Scrimgeour, says that the voice won't tackle this crisis, it's time for the PM to think again about his whole voice project.